So my first stop really is to go and see my parents, who obviously know far more about their family history than I do. They're very good at keeping kind of photos and records. My mother's father was called Godfrey. I remember him teaching me to catch. I remember playing with him in the garden, but I can't actually remember having any proper conversations. My father's father, his first name was Hubert. His second name was Ronald, so he was always known as Ron. Just a very lovely, very sort of gentle man. As far as I'm aware, he never talked about the war, but nor did my mum's dad, really. I've always assumed it was just one of those things that you just, in that generation, you just simply didn't talk about.
Hello, Pete. Great to see you. Come on in.
Where are we going?
In there.
In here?
That's a photograph of my father, Godfrey.
Oh, that's okay.
When he was in the army in the First
So how
World
old
War.
was he then?
Well, I should think that he's about 19, perhaps, or 20. He was in France throughout the war.
Presumably he would have gone through some of the more horrible...
I think he did. But whatever it was marked him dreadfully in a sort of subterranean way.
Yes.
So that when he became really old and not very well, I mean, he became confused and so on, he thought that he was reliving many of those war experiences. And it was horrific, really.
And is there any way of finding out what he did do? I mean, who would know?
He talked to my sister, Margaret, quite a lot, I think, when she was grown up and I had left home. And she might be able to tell you quite a bit more about his experiences, I think.
And this is Grandad?
That's my father, yes. Your other grandfather. He was born in 1899.
Near Sheffield, yeah?
Yes, the village called Wales, which is actually near Sheffield, yes.
Do you know what he did in there?
No, I mean, we build up a picture from the photos that we've got, but he never talked about it at all. His war experience was really quite short because he, I think he'd only been in France for a few days when he got wounded. And I remember, I mean, huge scars down the whole of his side, which of course were there forever, where he'd taken shrapnel on board. That's your granddad as well, and about before that. Yes, that's right. He'd been a grammar school boy, so he was naturally looked on as someone who might make an officer. He got his officer training at Cambridge before he went over to France. And this photograph here, as you'll see, we'll both recognise that. That's on the river at, well, I'm assuming on the Cam at Cambridge. Mm-hmm. Yes, he's number 5. That's him.
And do you know anything about this sort of period at Cambridge officer training?
I don't know what he was doing now, and I don't know how long he was there either. We've got a photograph here of his mother and his father. Edie was a...
You look quite like her, in fact.
Well,
they
call it the genetics, don't they? She was married to John, my grandfather. He was a miner. And when she had children of her own, she was determined that they should get a good education because she did not want her children to go down the pit.
It's remarkable, really, that he was the son of a miner, and yet, when the First World War was on, he was an officer. But before that, it was the fact that he went to a grammar school. I imagine in a pit village south of Sheffield, that was very unusual. I guess I need to start in South Yorkshire.
Kiveton Colliery, where Hugh's great-grandfather John Dennis worked in the 1900s, dominated the villages of Wales and Kiveton Park. At its height, it employed over 1,000 people. It was finally closed in 1994, and the buildings were demolished. Hugh is meeting Eric Chambers of the Kiveton Park and Wales History Society.
Very pleased to meet you.
Nice to meet you. So what have you found out?
Well, just take a look at this.
And this is what? This is
the census from 1901 for Wales and Kiveton Park.
Okay, and so that's John Dennis. So that he is my great-grandfather?
Great-grandfather, yes.
Because his wife, Edith, is here. And they have two sons, and this son here, Hubert R. R standing for Ronald, is my grandfather. So John Dennis he was 29.
Correct,
in 1901, and he was male, which is good and a relief.
It really is, yes.
And he was what does that say? So it's a hewer.
Hewer.
So coal miner hewer, which was what?
He actually worked on the coal face with a pick and shovel, actually cutting coal, and he would work an 8-hour shift on the coal face, and he would be expected to mine about 17 tonnes altogether in one shift. To actually do that, to mine 17 tonnes of coal in any conditions, but to actually do it under those circumstances
it's not a job
amazing.
For the claustrophobic, is it? I mean,
no, it isn't, no.
Wow.
Coal hewers in collieries like Kiveton worked in treacherous conditions. Almost every miner could expect to suffer an injury or experience a roof fall over the course of his career. And deaths underground were frequent occurrences. Lung disease caused by coal dust was common, and there was little welfare and no pensions for those unable to work. But in villages like Kiveton Park and Wales, there were few other opportunities for employment.
And would all these men, I mean, all these families would have worked down the pit, would they? Or
Well,
was it still
if you have a look,
okay.
this is another part of the census which give you an idea of the occupations.
So this family, the Turners, the head of the family is a hewer, and then a pony driver in the pit, and a pony driver in the pit, and a colliery engine driver, coal mine plate layer, pony driver coal mine, Frank Robinson, 16, pony driver. So you start quite young, don't you? So he's 15 and 14.
Tends to be a job that they started them off on.
And how young could you be? In
1901, 14 was about the age.
So my great-uncle Jack is 3 at this point, my granddad is 2. So there's got 10 more years. We're 10 years away from...
That's it, yes.
...these children having to go...
That's correct, yes.
Well...
In 1901, over 60,000 boys under the age of 16 worked in British coal mines. Nearly 9,000 of them in Yorkshire. And that year in the United Kingdom, 66 boys were killed in mining accidents.
It's astonishing, isn't it, when you think about how young 13 is? That's kind of frightening, really, isn't it?
Well, it's a job I couldn't have done at all. I managed to get out through education, and my father always told me he didn't want me to work down the pit. I went to grammar school.
Which is what my grandfather did.
Yes. The way out was education, if he could get it.
I think coming here, you get a real sense of why my great-grandparents were determined that their children wouldn't go down the pit. You know, childhood, in very simple terms, childhood ended really early. It was by no means inevitable that he was going to go to grammar school, and in fact it was much more likely, I guess, that he would have gone down the pit at 14. I know my grandfather made it to grammar school, but I don't know how he did that. That's as much as I know, so I need to find out about that.
Hugh has come to Wales Primary School to meet social historian Professor Keith Laybourne.
I mentioned there'll be something you might be interested in.
Yeah?
This is the honours board of the school. It's taken from the old school put in here.
Yeah.
Is there anything that attracts your attention?
1910. Dennis Ronald is my grandfather. He got a scholarship.
He got a scholarship.
Wales Educational Trust.
Yeah.
So what did that mean?
Well, it was the local landowners who raised money to allow bright working-class kids from this district to go to grammar school.
So he did well?
He did very well. To win a trust award, or indeed a county award, you are one in about 100 children. That's
right, okay.
It's that rare. And in a sense, if you were a son of a miner, probably even rarer.
In the early 20th century, secondary education was largely provided by public and fee-paying grammar schools, attended almost exclusively by children from the upper and middle classes. Less than 5% of working-class children made it to secondary school. But secondary education was expanding. The government began to help fund the building of a wave of new grammar schools. In return for this state aid, more places would be made available to children from poorer backgrounds. These places were awarded by scholarship, and to win one, Ronald Dennis had to show exceptional ability.
Well, here's the exam that
I feel slightly nervous, if I'm honest.
grandfather would have sat. But remember, this is a 10 and 11-year-old child that's probably taking this.
This is arithmetic paper. Postcards already stamped can be bought at the rate of 11 for 6 pence. Similar postcards, unstamped, can be bought at the rate of 25 for 1 penny. Explain which is cheaper, to buy postcards already stamped or postcards and stamps separately. It doesn't tell you how much stamps were.
And that's the problem,
that's almost impossible
It's
to
almost
know,
impossible, because I tried working that out yesterday. I couldn't.
We'll have to phone the post office and find out.
No, our collective ignorance is quite profound, really, isn't it?
You see, that's the kind of question that most 10 or 11-year-olds would just go,
Yeah.
So this is genuinely difficult, isn't it?
It is very, very difficult for a 10, 11-year-old child.
Do you know anything about the grammar school that he ended up at?
Well, it was Woodhouse Grammar School, opened in 1909, designed for 200 pupils, but was demolished recently. The next thing we have is a picture from about 1915, thereabouts. See if you can spot...
Oh, this was my grandfather. I found him. Is that? Yeah, that's definitely him.
And I believe you've got an Uncle Jack or a great.
I have, yeah. Is that Jack? It was a uniform and a half, wasn't it? And if you were, I mean, you know, kids taunt other kids. If you were the two kids from the mining village who'd gone off to the grammar school and you came home every day, wearing this sort of expensive-looking...
I'd stick together if I were them.
Really? I mean, it would have been...
I think the real problem I think you face at the turn of the century is this class situation. You are actually moving from being working class into a middle-class environment. You're not accepted by one, and you're beginning to almost alienate yourself from another. I think that's a real difficulty. Because you get it from both ends, really. Remember, you're not really part of the middle class, but you're no longer part of the working class.
Yeah. Both he and his brother, Jack, both went to grammar school, which kind of set the course for where I am now, if you like. If no one had got them in, or if they haven't got themselves in, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now.
Ronald Dennis left grammar school with expectations of a professional career and a bright future. But the world he found himself in was in turmoil. The First World War was raging in Europe, and thousands of young British men had already been killed. Ronald's plans were put on hold, and in January 1917, he joined the army.
The next thing we definitely know about my grandfather is that he ended up in officer training in Cambridge. So I guess the next step is to maybe get to Cambridge and see what there is there.
Hugh is visiting St John's College, which housed officer cadets during the First World War, and which he himself attended 60 years later.
I started there in the 80s. I imagine I was going to places that my grandfather had been at previously, but I've no idea what he did or what the officer training school was.
Hugh is meeting Professor Gary Sheffield, an expert on the history of officer training during the First World War.
Hey Gary, how are you?
Good to meet you.
This is rather odd for me because this is my old college.
Right.
Before coming to Cambridge for officer training, Ronald Dennis had joined the army as a private soldier. Gary has found a copy of his military service record.
Would you like to start by looking at this form?
Right, so this is an application for admission to an officer cadet unit.
He's been talent spotted. He's in training as an ordinary soldier. Someone has recognised that there is some sort of potential for leadership there, and so therefore he's recommended to be commissioned.
And was it unusual for grammar school boys to get commissions, or how did that work?
Before the war, definitely yes. The vast majority of officers came from public schools. But during the war itself, well, given the huge casualties, particularly among officers, the army was actively looking to recruit talented soldiers, no matter what their social background, and to some degree, social snobbery goes out the window. Actually, it's, can you do the job?
That's fascinating.
The First World War had taken a huge toll on the officer class. During the worst periods of the war, the average life expectancy of a junior officer on the Western Front was just 6 weeks. Many of these public school boys who would have been undergraduates were now fighting and dying on the front. Meanwhile, back in Cambridge, whole colleges had been commandeered by the army to train a new generation of officers from very different social backgrounds.
Now, what's happening now? This is target practice.
That's right. There's a really nice photo there.
So this is bayoneting bags of something, sandbags.
This is bayonet training. This is the sort of obvious military tactics training.
What a weird sort of conflict of worlds, almost, isn't it? Because this is the real kind of centre of learning, isn't it? And kind of intellectual learning. Then on the grass at the back, people are bayoneting sandbags.
There's a very interesting photo here I'd like to have a look at.
Oh, so this is the kind of formal medieval dining hall, and this is all the officer cadets being kind of served, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wow.
The army had a strong belief that soldiers would only follow gentlemen, and gentlemen had an ethos which fitted them out to be leaders. Officer training is not just about tactics. It's not just about learning to be an officer in the tactical sense. It's about learning to be a gentleman if you're not born or educated as one. So on some occasions, you would actually have instructors sitting on the same table as them, checking their table manners.
They're learning all that stuff about, do you lean to the left or the right when the wine
and the way to pass the port and all the rest of it, yeah.
So it was a proper training course in moving up a social class, wasn't it?
It absolutely was. And of course, if you think about, Ronald would have done this or something very similar to this. Coming from his background, suddenly he's in a medieval hall, high table off to one side, being served dinner, a new experience.
Great, so yeah.
Been talking about this idea of creating gentlemen. There's an interesting little poem written here called A Perfect Course. Perhaps if you'd like to have a look at the last verse.
It's 1 star now and a Sam Brown belt, and a temporary gentleman too. So remember, my boy, whenever you go, the varsity you've been through. Wow.
Now, for me, this really captures what it's about. I mean, a temporary gentleman. This is actually a dreadfully snobbish term that was bandied around at the beginning of the war. Officers like Ronald would have been hold temporary commissions. They would have been known as temporary officers, as in, once the war was over, they'd be back to civilian life. But the assumption was, and it's a very snobbish assumption, that these people would only have the manners and the bearing of an officer, of a gentleman, for the period the war's going on.
So it must have been very difficult, I guess. Your father is literally on the coalface, and then you're brought to these ridiculously plush, really, isn't it? surroundings in Cambridge. So how long would he have been here then? Just 6 months?
6 months. It was a 6 months course, and at the end of it he would have gone off to join his unit.
Between periods of military training, the cadets in Cambridge were encouraged to take part in all the traditional activities of student life, playing sports, punting on the river, and rowing.
I should think Ronald, my grandfather, found it very, very strange to be here. I should think this was unlike anywhere he'd imagined he would end up. Well, I don't suppose any of this felt very real to him. I don't think it could. I think it's probably taken from about here. There's a pub in this shot called the Fort St George, which is just there. So it's definitely here. So this is obviously the end of his time here because the leaves are on the trees. He started in January and he was only doing 6 months, so you know this is spring or early summer. As the end came to his time here, I think he can only have viewed leaving here with sort of trepidation, really. According to my dad, Ronald only arrived in France in the last weeks of the war and was quite badly wounded. I need to find out what happened to him.
Hugh is visiting the Imperial War Museum in London. He's meeting military historian Nigel Steele.
Hi, Hugh. Hi. But what I'm interested in is my grandfather when he leaves Cambridge and heads off to war.
Well, I mean, the first thing, I think, is his medal index record. And what's useful about the medal index record is it actually gives us the date he arrives in France.
So he goes to France on the 12th of October
1918.
So that's and the war ends on the 11th of the 11th of 18. Although presumably there is a bit of stuff after that, isn't there?
There's a month to go. But what's interesting about entering the Western Front at the beginning, middle of October, is that you're almost at the climax of the war. There are large numbers of German soldiers who are fighting as hard as they've ever fought. And although we can historically see that there may only be a month left, it doesn't make a difference. He doesn't know that.
By October 1918, the fighting on the Western Front was getting ever more desperate. The stalemate of trench warfare had been replaced by chaotic mobile combat across devastated terrain. The Germans had fallen back towards the Belgian border, close to the River Sambre. So the British High Command planned a major assault to smash these new German lines.
And what does he do when he arrives then?
Well, he was a platoon commander. So he would have been in command of a group of 30, 35 men.
He's 19,
and he's 19 years old. He's just arrived from Britain. There's a group of maybe 25, 30 hardened soldiers from the north of England, and you've been plonked from nowhere on the top. I mean, it's an intimidating prospect.
The target of Ronald's platoon was the village of Foutoy. To capture it, Ronald would have to lead his men through more than a mile of fierce German defences.
The attack takes place at 5 o'clock in the morning. It's very dark. There's a mist floating around. It's going to be extremely noisy. The shells will start flying in both directions instantaneously. Machine guns will crack out. You're not really going to be able to see where you're actually going. So very soon casualties will fall. I think the battle will degenerate into an almost inconceivable, terrifying experience.
Despite the German resistance, Ronald and his battalion successfully captured the village of Foutoy, but they suffered heavy losses.
The battalion was unlucky in losing 13 officer casualties, 5 killed, 8 wounded. And he gets wounded.
He gets wounded
on this day.
That's right.
Does he?
Yes, we know that because if we go down the rest of the the medical reports that we've actually got for him, and this is the description of the wound that he actually gets.
Wounded as above by fragments of shell wound or some sort of, upper arm right. And what does shell mean in that instance? Does that mean artillery shell, or does that mean...
Yes, an artillery shell that would have been fired and burst into fragments, and this large lump of hot metal would have flown towards him and ripped across his arm. It's all healed up within 2 or 3 weeks, so it's actually not that bad, but it's bad enough to take you off the battlefield.
Lucky. Very lucky. You know, tiny bit higher,
That's
tiny
right.
bit to the left. And that's where luck is on his side.
It does seem to be. When you look at the way it pans out for him, he could be somebody you could say had a lucky war.
Yeah, well, very, very lucky one.
Following his injury at Fouteuil, Ronald Dennis was sent home to England to recover. After the war, he left the army, married, and became a secondary school teacher. He died in 1990, aged 91.
I wonder, when I hear about his service, whether he rather underestimated what he had achieved. I mean, what I'm rather proud of, really, is the fact that, you know, when he was called upon, he did the thing that he was called upon to do. Without my grandfather's journey, I don't suppose my life would be in any sense the same, because his story, it seems to me, is one of social mobility, really, which had only started to become possible at that point. And if none of that had happened, I wouldn't be here, so...
Now Hugh wants to explore the very different war experience of his other grandfather, Godfrey Hindles.
My mum's dad obviously had this very long war. I don't want to know where he fought and what his story was, really, because I know even less about that, and there's more to know, really.
Hugh's Aunt Margaret has come up to London to share her memories of her father.
How lovely to see you. Long time.
It's a small room you've got here.
Extraordinary. So, there we are.
Now, Mum said, this is why I'm here, really, that you would know more about your father's kind of war record.
Yes, I think possibly I do.
Than she does.
Yes, I do. We've got photographs here, and this is one that was particularly, I knew so well. It's a family gathering. There's his beloved brother Frank, who just joined up, and there's my father, still in civvies. Frank then went off and got killed at Gallipoli.
Well, how old was he then? He was 17?
17, yes. And he was his best friend. And there was my father towards the end of the war, I take it.
This is a group of sergeants, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
He was in the war for a long time, wasn't he? So
Yes, he
joined up
was, both in France and in Belgium.
And did he tell you any kind of specifics of his war?
I don't know how I know this story. You have to understand that I don't know. But he was on a hill with an enormous amount of British troops, and the Germans surrounded them. And at the end of the battle, there were 9 of them left, 9 British, and the Germans had really won, obviously. And to get out of this hill, from this hill, they had to use the dead bodies of their comrades. I mean, it's so horrendous, isn't it? To build a bridge, because it was very marshy, I think, and, well, that was the only way out, you know, that was...
So he had one hell of a war, didn't he? Really?
He
I mean,
did.
it was sort of awful,
And it must have been
awful.
so hellish for him.
And do you think, I mean, obviously towards, you know, the end of his life, when I knew him, and I remember him as, you know, as a very sort of gentle, friendly, you know, grandfather, wasn't he?
Yes, he was lovely.
Taught
Yes,
me
he
to
was.
catch and stuff like that. But do you think it it absolutely coloured the rest of his life? I mean, was it the...
Inside.
Yeah.
Inside him. He woke every morning at 6 or just before and got up because he said the thoughts that crowded in were too terrible. And to get away, he'd go into the garden, and he tended our garden so beautifully. And it was his salvation, I think.
It's not something you'd really ever get over, is it?
No, 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 no.
Just sounds like he had a horrific time, really. The story that Margaret told me about my grandpa being, you know, one of 9 men left after a battle. I didn't know any of that at all. You know, I want to know where that was and what happened. I need to get to the bottom of that, I think.
Hugh is starting by doing an online search for Godfrey's military service record.
So here he is, Godfrey Parker Hinnells, Bury St Edmunds, age 20 years and 4 months, that's him. Right, so these are the records of his service. So he embarks for France on the 13th of February, it's my birthday, in 1917. It's all in a strange order, but he's in kind of active service in France for 18 months or so. It's very confusing because they've just filled in gaps wherever there is a gap, really. So it seems to start in 1919, go back to 1916. And it's just dates, really. I need to get to the story behind it, find out what happened in each of these places. I'm aware that this is a very different kind of journey. He left on the 13th of February 1917, presumably on a troop ship, going out to a very harsh training camp. You know, by contrast, I'm on a nice, warm ferry heading, I hope, for a hotel. It must have been deeply frightening, I think, when you know that the next step is action. You must kind of look back and just think, I wonder if I'll ever get back there again.
Hugh is in northern France, heading south to the city of Arras, where Godfrey was sent shortly after he arrived. It was the scene of one of the pivotal battles of the First World War. By April 1917, the Western Front was in stalemate, with both sides dug in a vast network of trenches. To break this deadlock, the British launched a major offensive against the German trenches outside the city of Arras. Godfrey had been assigned to the Suffolk Regiment. In early April 1917, they were stationed close to the village of Neuville-Vitasse, southeast of Arras. To find out what they were doing there, Hugh has arranged to meet battlefield historian Jeremy Banning at a military cemetery on the outskirts of the village.
Hi.
Hi. Hello, Hugh. Nice to meet you.
And you. Can I tell you what I know then?
Yes.
What I've worked out so far is that his war, his action, started here, somewhere here. There are other bits of his story that I'm following as well, where he gets stuck on the top of a hill with sort of 9 men, and they're the only ones left standing, really, which okay. I want to get to the bottom of. But I'm just sort of interested to know what happened here and why he was here.
Yeah. Well, I've got some maps. If I can show you
that'd be great,
modern maps, and we can see whereabouts we were. Okay, well, here's the town of Arras here, and this is the village of Neuville-Vitasse, just here. So the tree-lined road that you can see just running just on the ridge, perhaps 300 yards away from us, that's the position that they're brought to, between Neuville-Vitasse and Hénin-sur-Cojeul.
And
we're just here. Yeah,
looking
just here.
that way.
Absolutely, looking back across the field.
So what was Godfrey doing here on that, you know, in April 1917?
Well, if I can refer you to the war diary here, if you have a look on the 13th.
OK, so a great deal of burial and salvage work was done by the battalion in the vicinity of the trenches in front of the Hindenburg line.
The trenches up towards this area had been attacked on the 9th of April. So the Suffolks were brought in, as the war diary says, to bury the dead who had been killed in the attack on the 9th of April. And that's why we're here, because there's a very, very good chance that Godfrey and the Suffolks created this cemetery that we're standing by.
The weather was bitterly cold and it snowed heavily. Wow, so it's snow here.
Yeah, the bodies of the men who'd been killed in this attack would have been lying under a blanket of snow. And so Godfrey's role would have been to find those men underneath that snow and dig into it, to try into the snow, to try and recover that body. A lot of the bodies would have been blown into pieces as well. So they would have been in a pretty dreadful state. So a horrible job. You can see the fact that these men are buried with the headstones buttressed next to each other. There was no time for individual graves. They would have dug a long trench and buried them in there.
You know, for someone who hasn't yet been to war, that must be, you know, it's pretty harrowing stuff, isn't it? You have to kind of thinking, well, I'm next, aren't you? Unavoidably, I would have thought.
It would be a very, very tough introduction to what modern warfare was, really. So we're coming up now, we're coming up onto this high ground of Hennin Hill, and the German line ran across to the left, just behind the ridge. And if you look in front of you to the left, you can see the remains of a German strong point here. This whole landscape used to be dotted with these, and this was a machine gun position within the Hindenburg line.
The Hindenburg line was a massive German fortification that stretched across northern France. It was made up of an elaborate network of trenches and tunnels, surrounded by fields of barbed wire. During the Battle of Arras, breaking through the Hindenburg line was the Allies' main objective. Godfrey's next assignment with the Suffolks was to launch an attack on this formidable fortification.
Anywhere here?
Yeah, perhaps if we stop in there, then we can pull up on the right here.
Jeremy has brought Hugh to the site of the attack.
The Hindenburg line itself was two lines of trenches, and we're between the two. And the reason we know where we are is because you can see this white chalk line in the field running through there. Can you see the residue on the surface? Yeah. So that gives you the perfect line of the support line of the Hindenburg. And that is because that had been dug down into the chalk, and so it leaves a perfect scar on the landscape.
The Allies had already seized a short stretch of the Hindenburg line north of this area. The plan was for Godfrey's Suffolk battalion to enter the German trenches in the north and fight their way down using grenades, killing and capturing German soldiers as they went.
This is a German map of the time, showing perfectly the Hindenburg line running down here in blue. This is their start position, and they're working down the front and support line of the Hindenburg line. You're actually attacking along trenches rather than attacking against them.
OK. And what happens is?
Let's have a look at the war diary once again. So let's see.
Oh, OK. The advance commenced at 4:45 a.m, meeting with a good deal of opposition of all sorts. until reaching the second sunken road, which is this.
Absolutely,
is it?
yeah.
So they're not in open country. They're fighting their way down a trench, above the trench, or in the trench?
No, they're in the trench. To put it in its crudest term, what you're doing is you're throwing grenades at the enemy, who are doing the same to you as well. I'll show you what the trench was like. You can see the way it goes along and then returns in fire bays. So you have this zigzag shape. So when you're bombing your way along, you don't know what you're going to encounter when you're working your way around each bay. Specialist bombers who would pull the pin on their grenade, throw the grenade up over the top here, and then specialist bayonet men whose role would be, in the split second that grenade explodes, to be round the corner to bayonet any Germans. Once they bayoneted them, the quickest way to dispatch someone is rifle butt in the face. So it's smash into the face. The nature of the fighting within this is about as brutal as it can get. And if we think about Godfrey having joined the battalion in March, he's thrown into one of the most savage infantry battles of the entire war. So he is now, from being as green as you can get, in the middle of this utter melee.
3 hours after starting their attack, Godfrey and the Suffolks were within 200 yards of their objective. But there their progress was halted. The Germans began a fierce bombardment of the trenches from a neighbouring village, and the British were forced to retreat.
There's a series of memoirs left by a man called Captain Stormont Gibbs, who was the adjutant of the 1st 4th Suffolks.
Oh, well, this is of this actual attack,
Absolutely, yes.
We calculated that not more than half the battalion could be left to hold 2 miles of trench. So they've lost, they've lost that number of men, is that right? As you go down. Soon came the news that we had no one left in the front trench. All were wounded or madly trying to escape with the wounded. Then came the report that our bombs, which we kept hurling up to the front, were duds and so were useless. When the enemy had driven us back for a considerable distance along our front line, he was of course able to work down the communication trenches and get in behind our men. They tried to save themselves by bolting across the open, but they ran into barbed wire and were mopped up to a man by machine guns. Wow. So they lost half their men.
They lost half their men, yeah. And ended up at the end of the day exactly where they started.
Of around 700 men who began the attack on the Hindenburg trenches, just 350, including Godfrey, survived.
What an introduction to combat that is, really. It's very brutal. It's very brutal. It's almost impossible to imagine the noise and the horror of finding yourself in something like that. You're just fighting for your life, and the way that you have to fight for your life is to kill lots of Germans as you go. It's impossible to imagine what the effect is, really.
By the end of the Battle of Arras, the Allies had taken hardly any ground, yet the cost to human life was immense. In 5 weeks, the Allies suffered nearly 160,000 casualties, an average of over 4,000 men a day.
So I hardly dare ask, but what happens to Godfrey after this, then?
The next major action is not too far from the Belgian city of Ypres, sort of between Ypres and the Passchendaele Ridge.
So this is Passchendaele that's
right.
About to happen now.
That's right, yeah.
This is like a series of really awful fixtures, isn't it? It's like
It is, yeah.
you go and have a rest, and then you've got to play the next one.
Absolutely.
It's sort of horrific fixture list.
In July 1917, the Allies launched an attack on the German lines around the village of Passchendaele, east of the Belgian city of Ypres. Passchendaele would become one of the most brutal and chaotic battles of the war. Within a few months, the countryside had been completely destroyed, and heavy rains had turned the battlefields into a quagmire. Tens of thousands of Allied soldiers were being killed, trying to advance just a few miles into German-held territory.
We're coming out of Ypres now, and as we're going up this ridge here, you can see the ground rising in front of us, and that was where the German lines ran up. Running along the top of that ridge, the British on the lower slope. And it was from these positions that the British launched their offensive, the Battle for Passchendaele.
Is Passchendaele the other side of the ridge?
Passchendaele is away to our left.
On the 26th of September, Godfrey and the Suffolks were set to launch an attack on the German lines towards the Passchendaele Ridge. But their plan came to nothing. Before they could leave their starting positions, they came under intense German artillery bombardment. By the end of the encounter, they'd suffered over 250 casualties, a third of the battalion. Godfrey survived, and he and his comrades were withdrawn from the front line and spent the winter in camps close to the town of Popperinge. The town of Popperinge, close to Ypres, was commandeered by the British Army during the war. Just off the town square was Talbot House, a club for British soldiers. Today it's a museum.
Hi, Hugh, please come in. Welcome to Talbot House.
The secretary is Jan Luagi.
So this is my grandfather, Godfrey. Right. I've got this war diary.
Oh, that's really interesting. He was in Toronto camp, which is just off the road here. So it's only about 2 miles from Popperinge.
So he would have come to Talbot House, I suppose? Or
well,
he would have...
there's a big chance he would have come.
Talbot House was founded by a British Army chaplain, Philip Tubby Clayton. It was unique in offering soldiers the comforts of home in the heart of the battlefield.
This is a picture taken in the other room. There was a piano, nice painting on the wall.
It also feels terribly British.
Oh, yes. The ground floor was just chairs, armchairs, carpets, curtains, you know. It was a sort of a home from home. And then there was also a concert hall, you know, because Talbot House had its own orchestra.
So a really important place in the lives of the soldiers who were
definitely
in the camps around Ypres.
Oh, yeah, yes. Lots of British soldiers were very fond of the garden, you see, because Ypres was a sea of mud. Here there was a garden with green grass, with birds sitting in the treetops.
Well, my grandfather was very keen on gardening, see. He kind of treated the garden, when he got back from the war, as his way of...
Really?
Kind of escaping, really. So.
Oh. Well, this was also considered as a sort of a therapy, you know, by the chap who ran the place. He said, if you do gardening, you forget all about the war.
Well, maybe that's a lesson my grandfather learnt here. You don't...
Yeah, possibly.
Could be, couldn't it?
Yeah. Tubby Clayton managed to get together a chapel, you know, and again, one of the soldiers who was a good painter, he painted this, you know, with what it looked like. But if you want to, we can go and have a look.
Is it still here, is it?
It's still here, yes.
Oh, no, I'd love to do that, yeah.
OK, let's go and have a see it.
It's incredibly simple, isn't it?
Yes. We found a very nice account by one soldier who was telling his wife all about Talbot House.
And pushing through the door, I found myself at once in a different world. During the preceding 3 weeks, I had lived in a land of mud and death. Many of my best friends had passed over. Others I had seen mangled, wounded, and in agony. After some hesitation, I climbed a narrow stairway into the upper room, so that's that staircase. I had been to services often enough, both in the army and in those almost forgotten civilian days. Yet in that little upper room, in company with a few dozen other men who had been tried by fire as I had been tried, I found for the first time the courage and satisfaction that men have agreed to call the peace of God which passeth understanding. And I came down the stairs ready and able to face again the dangers and troubles of the morrow. You can see that, really.
Yeah. It brings
It's
it
a
all
very
home,
peaceful
doesn't
place,
it? Yeah,
isn't it?
yeah, very much so.
I still don't know how his war ends. And I also need to see if I can get to the bottom of this story where he is one of the last men standing on this hill surrounded by Germans. And I don't think I've found that yet. Neither of the places we've been seem to be that.
In the spring of 1918, having spent the winter away from the front line, Godfrey Hinels found himself once again in the thick of the action. The German High Command launched a massive attack on the Allied forces on the Western Front, the Spring Offensive. Godfrey and his new regiment, the Lincolnshires, were charged with defending the village of Witzkete on the outskirts of Ypres.
So this is Witzkete.
This is the village of Witzkete, that's right. Godfrey's unit were brought in to defend this area.
And so the Germans are there,
Absolutely,
coming
yeah,
towards
coming
us.
across this way. It was a desperate time. So as Godfrey's sitting here, they're perfectly aware that they're going to be attacked. It's not if they're going to be attacked, it's when they're going to be attacked. Sir Douglas Haig, commanding the British Expeditionary Force, the special order of the day. If you have a look at the date, it's just a few days before Godfrey was here.
To all ranks of the British Army in France and Flanders, there is no other course open to us but to fight it out. Every position must be held to the last man. There must be no retirement. With our backs to the wall and believing in the justice of our cause, each one of us must fight on to the end. The safety of our homes and the freedom of mankind alike depend upon the conduct of each one of us at this critical moment.
And so this is where Godfrey finds himself, right,
So it's this
right in
far,
the middle of it.
no further.
On the morning of the 16th of April 1918, the Germans launched their attack. Godfrey and his Lincolnshire battalion, consisting of around 400 men and vastly outnumbered, were directly in their path, holding a section of the Allied front line on the edge of the village of Witzkete.
So at 4:30 a.m. on the morning of the 16th, the enemy put down a terrific bombardment on our front line. So that's coming this way, so they're firing.
They're firing. We're on this line here, so they're coming this way.
Under cover of a dense fog, the enemy attacked on the flanks of the battalion and succeeded in breaking our line. Strong parties of the enemy then wheeled inwards and attacked both flanks of the battalion. So he's facing this way, but now he's got Germans have come that way and that way.
The Germans had broken through the British line on both sides of the village, circling back to attack Godfrey's battalion on both flanks.
This is owing to the dense fog and bombardment, it's impossible to get a clear idea of the situation. And the companies didn't know they were attacked until the enemy appeared at close quarters.
Godfrey and his comrades would have been unable to see the Germans breaking in, so the Germans appearing at you out of the fog, so from probably just a few yards away. So it's terrifying, hand-to-hand fighting.
Within hours, Godfrey's battalion had been almost wiped out. Small pockets of soldiers were left to defend the rising ground on the edge of the village, while the Germans closed in steadily from both sides.
Well, the story was that he, I think, is on the top of a hill with kind of 9 other men and surrounded, and manages then to retreat or escape somehow. According to my Aunt Margaret, he said that they kind of had to use the bodies of their dead colleagues as a kind of walkway. But I'm sure you couldn't ever really verify that. That would never be in here, would it?
I think it's 86 men, 87 men made it out of this action. So the account of there being 9 men, that might be 9 men from his platoon.
So how many would have started the action?
Well,
so 80-something?
No, perhaps 400.
Right, OK. So you've lost 3/4 of the company?
Of the entire battalion.
So you think this is probably where that story of 9 men
It ties in.
Comes from.
It ties in very well. There's no other action within Godfrey's service that would tie in with this.
Well, I'm glad I know where it is. I'm glad I wasn't there at the time.
The defence of Witskete marked the end of Godfrey's frontline service. After the war, he returned to his hometown of Bury St Edmunds, where he got married and spent the rest of his life. He died in 1974.
It's been a very interesting journey. One of the aspects of it which it's really kind of rammed home is that this was a war fought in farmland. It was just a sort of muddy, bloody, horrifying mess. I'm glad I now understand the landscape. I have a better feeling for what it was like and how awful it was. I understand entirely why neither of my grandfathers really wanted to talk about the war, because why would you want to talk about the war? It's so unremitting in its sort of awfulness that I imagine you wouldn't really want to inflict it on anyone else. In the end, they might not have talked about it, but I am delighted that they had the choice not to talk about it. In other words, that they got home.